Have you ever wanted someone so deeply that their silence felt louder than a war? They called him a conqueror, a man who bent continents beneath his boots and rewrote the shape of Europe with nothing but strategy and stubbornness. But in the shadows beneath the medals and maps was another man entirely, one who wrote long, trembling letters to a woman who often didn't reply, a man who ached not for victory, but for closeness. In this episode, we don't look at Napoleon through the eyes of war or empire. We listen to his private words, and through them, we uncover something deeper, the soft, unspoken hunger that power could never satisfy, the need to be wanted, to be missed, to be human. The year was 1796. Napoleon Bonaparte was 26, ambitious, newly married, and already consumed by something much larger than his military campaign in Italy. Her name was Josephine. He wrote to her feverishly, sometimes twice a day. And while the world around him bowed to his orders, this one woman remained maddeningly distant. She missed his letters. She delayed her replies. And in her silences, Napoleon unraveled not as a general, but as a man. He begins one letter like this: "I wake up full of you. Your image and the memory of last night's intoxication has left no rest to my senses." This is not the voice of a tactician. It is the voice of a man undone. His words come in fragments, as if they're chasing the shape of her. He doesn't write like a man who's in control. He writes like a man who needs her to complete something in him. 1,000 kisses, but do not give me any, for they burn my blood. There's an ache in those words, not just sexual, but spiritual, as though he's reaching through paper and time to close the unbearable distance between them. In the battlefield, he commands thousands. But in these letters, he's completely disarmed. He begins to obsess not just over her body, but over her absence. Each missed letter, each delayed reply, becomes a wound. And yet, he keeps writing. Why? Because inside every man who is told to be strong, stoic, and sure, there is a part that still longs to be held, not just honored, touched, not just obeyed. That's what Napoleon is chasing here, not conquest, connection. But Josephine wasn't in love the way he was. Her letters back were brief, playful, even dismissive. She missed him, she'd say, but not with the same desperation. She was out at the theater. She was in salons. She was moving through Paris while he bled his heart into ink from a cold army tent. And this imbalance became unbearable. The more she pulled away, the more he leaned in. In one letter, he pleads, "I don't love you anymore. On the contrary, I detest you. You're a villain, truly perverse, very stupid, a real Cinderella." But then, just lines later, "But you're still the only one who makes my heart tremble." This is the language of someone who's not sure whether he's in love or in withdrawal. He swings between adoration and resentment. Not because he's unstable, but because he's honest. Because when desire isn't returned, it doesn't just sting, it destabilizes, especially for a man whose whole identity is built on control. These letters, desperate, raw, at times even pathetic, reveal what history books ignore: that even the most powerful men are powerless in the face of longing. It's strange, isn't it, that the man who once crowned himself Emperor of France, because he didn't want to seem small in the eyes of the Pope, was once a boy crying on paper for a woman who forgot to write back. There's something heartbreakingly human in that. We are not taught to look at male longing as sacred. We are taught to laugh at it, or fear it, or worse, ignore it. But these letters, they say otherwise. They say even the strong crave softness, even the mighty ache for warmth, even Napoleon. As months passed, something in Napoleon's letters began to shift. The heat of longing cooled into a slow, simmering fear. He began to suspect Josephine wasn't just distracted, but unfaithful. She had taken a young officer as a lover. The whispers reached him at camp. The silence between her letters grew longer. And with every hour that passed without word from her, his imagination filled the gaps with scenes he could not bear. He writes, "You love me less, but I love you more. You have devoured my heart and left me starving. There is no battlefield for this kind of war. There are no tactics for love that slips quietly out of your grasp. All that's left is the echo of desire and the unbearable awareness that it may not be mutual anymore." He questions himself, his masculinity, his worth. "You don't love me. At least you don't know how to love. You are wicked, capricious, inconstant. But what does it matter? You are mine." These aren't the words of an emperor. They are the words of a man unraveling at the edges, trying to convince himself that possession could replace passion. That being needed was the same as being wanted. And yet beneath the bitterness, there is still tenderness. He writes of her scent, of her arms, of wanting to feel her skin again. "I am jealous of everyone who sees you, who touches your hand. You are not here, and yet I feel you near me, always just out of reach." This is not just a story of love. It's a story of eros and ego, of intimacy and identity. Because for many men, especially those taught to lead, to conquer, to stay composed, desire becomes dangerous when it threatens their sense of control. And when they feel themselves losing someone they love, they begin to lose themselves too. Napoleon, so invincible in uniform, was no longer certain of anything when he undressed emotionally. And maybe that's the most honest kind of naked. His vulnerability wasn't theatrical. It wasn't for public eyes. These letters were meant to be private. But now, more than 200 years later, we hear his voice across time, and it sounds just like ours. We hear the fear that maybe we're too much, or not enough. We hear the voice that says, if she pulls away, it must be something I did, something I lack. And underneath all of it, the aching, the jealousy, the confusion. There is a man still hoping she will see him, not as a general, not as a legend, but simply as the man who wakes up every day wanting to be loved. In one of his last letters before they reunite, he writes, "I'm coming back to you, but not with triumph in my chest. I'm afraid of what I'll see in your eyes, of what you'll see in mine." That line stops me, because no matter how much history inflates our egos with stories of victory and legacy, the truth is this: every man carries with him two fears: to be forgotten and to be unloved. Even Napoleon, even now. Eventually, Josephine came back, not just physically, but into Napoleon's life, into his bed, into the public eye as the wife of an emperor. But something in him had changed. The heat of obsession cooled into something more brittle, more fragile. He had learned through her distance that longing is not always returned. And when it is, it's often different than what we imagined. He stopped writing her letters, not because he no longer cared, but because he no longer needed to spill himself onto the page to be noticed. It's tempting to believe that love once found will heal everything. That reunion brings restoration, but Napoleon's story reminds us that even great lovers grow apart. And even when they stay together, something inside may remain unsettled. When he crowned himself emperor in 1804, Josephine was by his side. And yet behind the scenes, their marriage was deteriorating. Her inability to give him an heir and the lingering ache of her past infidelities cast a shadow over their bond. In 1810, he divorced her, but not with anger, not with revenge, with sadness and strange tenderness. Years later, on his deathbed far from France, stripped of power and exiled to the island of St. Helena, Napoleon whispered a list of names. Among them was Josephine. So what does this mean for us men in the second half of life? Wondering about love desire and the pieces of ourselves we've handed to people who didn't always know what to do with them. What do we do with the memories of wanting more than we received? With the letters we never sent? With the touch we still crave? Here's what Napoleon teaches us, not with his victories, but with his vulnerability, that even the most powerful man is helpless in the face of true yearning. That desire, when not returned, does not make you weak. It makes you human. And that sometimes love is not about being loved back the way we want. It's about learning who we are when we love at all. In the end, maybe those letters weren't just for Josephine. Maybe they were for him, a way to hold on to something real when everything else felt scripted, a way to stay soft in a world that asked him to be steel, a way to remember that beneath the medals, the politics, the crowns, he was still just a man, hungry, tender, hopeful, still writing, still waiting, still wanting to be seen, not as a figure in history, but as someone who once burned with love, just like you, just like me, just like all of us. If you've ever wanted someone too much, if you've ever doubted your worth because they didn't answer, if you've ever whispered a name into the dark long after they stopped saying yours, you're not alone. Napoleon wrote letters. You're still writing yours. And maybe tonight that's enough. So maybe love doesn't always look like the stories we're told. Maybe it's not tidy, maybe it lingers unfinished, but still there's something beautiful in having felt it at all. Even if it broke you, even if it changed you, and if tonight you're sitting with your own unwritten letter, know this: you're not alone in the waiting. You're not strange for still hoping. You're not weak for remembering. Thank you for listening to this confession from the quiet side of history. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment, even just a few words. And if you'd like to hear more truth spoken gently, subscribe to the channel. We'll be here, telling the stories men carry in silence, so they don't have to carry them alone.